Hello and welcome to Politics and Prose Live. Thank you for joining us in this new format where we continue to bring you the authors you love and their new books to the Politics and Prose community. Just some quick housekeeping notes. At any time during the event tonight, you can click on the green button below to purchase tonight's book on Politics and Prose's website. Our physical stores are closed and we need your online purchases in order to keep bringing you the programming that P&P is known for. Also tonight, you can ask Emily a question by clicking on the Ask a Question feature, which is also below at the bottom of the screen. You can also read other people's questions and even vote for ones you'd like to hear answered the most. And a reminder, neither the author, the host, or other audience members can see you through the screen, so feel free to relax and get comfy. So tonight, I'm honored to welcome Emily Gould to Politics and Prose Live to discuss her novel, Perfect Tunes. Perfect Tunes is the story of Laura, an aspiring musician who moves to Brooklyn in the early 2000s and falls hard for a troubled guitarist. 15 years later, Laura, now a single mother, is forced to confront her past and the dreams she put on hold. Tonight, Emily will be in conversation with Olivia Nuzzi, a reporter currently serving New York Magazine's Washington correspondent. So without any further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome Emily Gould and Olivia Nuzzi to Politics and Prose Live.
Hi, thank you for doing this.
Oh,
congratulations.
Thanks. Thank you for agreeing to do this at such short notice.
Yeah, I'm not doing literally anything else.
Yeah, likewise, except for just like fending off my feral children with a stick. So that's basically my life now. But yeah, I knew that I wanted to do like an event where I was in conversation with you after I saw you and Taffy at the Wing, and you guys were so good together. I don't know. You just asked really great questions about the book, and it was such a fun night. I had also been like really deprived of like any kind of, social contact for a while, sort of like now actually, but it was because I was living in DC over the summer and I was like spending a lot of time with my family. And so when I went to see you guys do your thing at the Wing, it was like the first time that I'd like gone to an event with like just grown-ups in a while, and the whole time I was like they're just talking about things that don't have anything to do with diapers or like my specific children.
Well, thank you for coming to that. And I'm sorry we can't similarly be in the same place for this Q&A, but so I read the book. I loved it, and I wanted to talk to you a bit about, am I correct that you were writing this during 2016?
Oh,
is that when you first?
Yeah. No, I actually had finished a draft of it that I sold.
Okay.
So it sold in September of 2016, and then I got and then the world changed a lot really fast.
I don't have any idea what you're talking about. Everything's so wonderful.
Being really vague about that, but yeah, and so then I had to pick it up and do the revisions, and I had to decide, like, am I going to bring this book into the present at all? Am I going to have the characters even like mention Trump once? And I'm actually friends with the novelist Nell Zink. I mean, to the extent that she has friends, and she's a real weirdo, but like a genius, like a genuine genius. And she wrote a whole novel during the span when I was, like basically dilly-dallying about like whether I could ever get back to like a version of this book that I've been working on for like a few years, before Trump was elected. And she was like, you should just have them like mention it in like a casual offhand way. It can't be that hard to just like find a place where the characters would just like naturally be talking about like the upcoming election or whatever. And I was like, and I tried, I really tried to find that place in the draft, and it just felt like it didn't exist. Like maybe these people were just not, I don't know, like probably that sort of thing did happen off stage, but it was just like, it had nothing to do with what I had written a book about. And at first that seemed like bad and weird and false. And then like a few drafts later, it just started to seem like okay and inevitable. I mean, I think also when you are in the really intense parts of being a young person who's like, you know, like Laura is at the beginning of the book, and then being a mother and like being a single mother and like having like sole responsibility for a child, and then later like having a teenager who's like really a lot. Like those are all times when like whatever you're going through personally, it's like so all consuming. Like there's probably a part of your brain that's like, you know, thinking about like the larger world, but you're not going to be like bringing it up in casual chit chat, I guess, in a way that would seem natural for me to include in the book. Anyway, I don't know, maybe I failed.
No, I don't. I mean,
I'll have to ask Nell. I'm sure she thinks that I failed, but you know, she also has said that like I'm really good at, she likes my syntax, but my subject matter does not interest her. So.
Well, she sounds rude.
Yeah, she's like a really brutal person, but it's one of those things where it's like, I'm just so honored that she's communicating with me at all. I'm like, you know, slap me again. Like, I love it, you know?
That's how I feel about Camille Paglia, the author. I feel like I've been emailing her like every couple of years for like my entire adult life, and she's never nice and she's never friendly. But anytime she responds to me, I'm like just so delighted that my existence has been validated in this way that I don't even care how rude or dismissive she's being.
Yeah, no. I have a lot of people in my you know, peripherally in my life, in my inbox who are like that. And yeah, sometimes it's just an honor to be browbeaten and condescended to by someone. I'm also inspired by women who are just like frankly very mean. Like maybe I'll get there someday, but for now I'm still sort of like, I'm so sorry I existed, oh sorry, you know, like it's just my natural like default setting.
So I wanted to talk to you about like how did the story start to come to you? Because it's told, would it be fair to say, I mean, it feels very episodic, right? Like you have, without giving too much away, it starts with Laura as a young woman in her early 20s moving to New York, and then you kind of jump ahead a little bit to when she's a young mother, and then you jump ahead a little bit more to when she's a slightly older but still young mother, and then you jump ahead to her having this complicated teenager. So how does something like that begin to take shape for you? Does it start with the idea that you want to write about motherhood and about parenting and identity in that context, or did it start with the characters and with this story?
I definitely knew that I would write about motherhood because that was just like what was available to me. I mean, I was just really like having kids pretty much the whole time I was working on this book. But I also was really interested in the teenager parts of it, and those were the first scenes that I wrote any version of.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
and they come pretty late in the book.
Yeah. So the rest of the book was just sort of like about figuring out how to get there, because I knew I wanted to write about a teenage girl who like hates her mom, but then I wanted to figure out how to make that mom a really fully realized character, and the way that I thought I wanted to do that was to have a big chunk of the book take place before she became a mom, you know, back when she was just a person. I guess because like I've always been really curious about my own mom and what her life was like before she became my mother. Just the fact that it is by its nature unknowable is interesting to me. And it is something that I started thinking about a lot more after I had kids, because, you know, like there's this version of me that they'll never know, and probably never be that interested in knowing, which is okay. But yeah, so I did this terrible first draft that had a teenage girl character traveling back in time to meet her mother and like befriend her. And it was very different. It was very bad.
I'm really bad.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I couldn't pull off the time travel at all. I started like inventing all these like rules for how the time travel worked that like a lot of people have written about time travel, and I'm pretty sure all of them have done it better than me. Like
There's no time travel in this book. I just
there's
want to be
definitely
clear.
no, not even metaphorical. Yeah, like the worst episode of Doctor Who is like way, way, way better than the first draft of this book that I wrote. They time traveled via ayahuasca trip, like just to give you a sense of how bad it was. But I definitely like used elements of, I mean, like it's weird. It's like a version of it still like exists in my brain. It'll never exist in any other format, but it's like
I think you should release it as like a bonus, like a bonus edition of Perfect Tunes plus the time travel ayahuasca trip.
A director's cut. Yeah. I feel like I must have done like whatever the digital equivalent of burning it is, though, because like I don't think it exists, you know. I think I was like delete. It's so bad. But yeah, it did. Like sometimes you really do, at least I do, have to just give yourself permission to like really suck in order to just do anything at all. And then once you've done something, you know, you have, even if you end up throwing the vast majority of it away, like there's something to build on rather than, you know, nothing.
So you started with wanting to write about a teenager, and then how did the story of Laura's life come about? Like, how do you invent something like that?
Well, Laura's a singer-songwriter, and she's really talented, but she doesn't have a lot of ambition, and she moves to New York at the same time that I did. She's a little bit older than I was when I moved to New York, but she moves to New York in May of 2001. So I had some building blocks for sort of like what my sense of what a singer-songwriter's like creative life is like, just based on listening to music and reading about musicians a little bit, and like and sometimes interviewing musicians, just like over the years, not in any like really focused, intentional way, but I feel like I was sort of like gathering a little bit of intel about just like this maybe a sort of romanticized version of like how music comes into being, because I think it is so different from just writing, you know. But I also wanted to I wanted to create this character who wasn't like me really very much at all, even though she, you know, is living in the same New York that I was living in at the same time, and sort of going to some of the same places, and like probably having sex with some of the same people. She is really different from me because she's very, very talented and knows what she wants to do, but is not really like she doesn't have a lot of like hustle, I guess. Like she's not she has no like, she's not a striver. She's sort of the kind of person who like assumes that things will just happen to her, and she's gonna like go with the flow and let them happen. It takes her a long time to figure out that that's not actually how the world works. Like if you do that, the world is gonna reward the people around you who don't have any talent but who do have the hustle.
Or the type of person who wrote a perfect song and then like forgot it, basically.
Yeah, it was like, oh, maybe I didn't really write that. It was like too good, you know? And so, yeah, it takes her like almost 20 years to figure out that she needs to be the person who cares the most about the work that she does, because no one else is going to be that person. And she's sort of not wasted time, but she's definitely like spun her wheels a lot, waiting for someone to give her permission to go for it. And that seems like something that I you know, I see it happening a lot, but like, that's not, just to be totally clear, that's not me. I'm like the less talented, like grinder person who's like going to get it without knowing even what it is necessarily. So I was, you know, I don't know. That's how I sort of like smushed the character together out of like these disparate like ideas about like what people are like.
But they're not based on anyone in particular.
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, sometimes I imagine people, like the physicality of people who I know, or even just sort of like acquaintances, so that I can sort of like see them like moving through a room. Like, but it can just be someone who I like barely know, who I like interact with occasionally, or someone who I like see a lot in a cafe or something, you know, like.
You let them know? You like slip someone in the cafe a note and say like, hey, FYI, you're Callie, here's the book.
Well, I actually talked to my friend so my friend Alice Wetterland is like the closest thing to like, she's not like at all like a one-to-one Callie, but she's sort of like a Callie like figure in my life, because she's like, she's an actress and a comedian, and she, you know, when we were like in college, or like, you know, I guess like in our early 20s, she was like working in a store, like dating really cool people all the time, and just having a very sort of like glamorous, like nightlife-y life. And it took her a while to like focus that into like what she's doing now. But once she figured it out, it was like, you know, she moved to LA, and then I would be like, you know, in a bar eating like chicken wings, and then I'd look up at the screen and I'd be like, oh my God, Alice is in a commercial for Progressive Insurance. Like, so yeah, I don't know. But I told her that, and she's read the book, and she was like, oh, I didn't even notice that. That's not me at all. And so I was like, okay. Yeah, because it's just like little bits and pieces of people. Right. I think like I'm not good enough yet to do like portraits of people. And when I was younger, I tried to, and I wasn't ready yet, and it really offended people. And like, I don't know. I'm hoping that I'll get there eventually. Like, this book is like a very, very, very indirect way of writing about my relationship with my mother, and who's probably watching this, by the way, because like it's on the internet. I'm not there yet. Like, I'm not good. I know that I'm not good enough yet to like approach that something so vast head on. And I think you have to either be like really young and just like full of energy and drive and ambition and like heedlessness to like take on something that huge, or you have to be like, you know, older and more experienced, and like really like your powers need to have matured. But I don't know, like this is just like the closest I could get with like the resources that I had during the time that I was writing this book, you know.
How old are your children?
A 4.5-year-old, or actually I have an almost 5-year-old and an almost 2-year-old.
So they were really little or non-existent when you were doing this book, right?
Yeah, that terrible time travel draft was during my first pregnancy. Okay. And then I sold the book, and then it like pretty much immediately got pregnant with my second child, like as a reward, I guess, for finishing the draft, like for selling it. I was like, okay, like now I can get like pregnant again. Like, anyway, yeah.
What's so devastating to me was reading about Marie and how the relationship develops for her with her mother is how it snuck up on me as a reader, her like growing resentment towards her mother, and how like mundane that resentment was. It wasn't like some big event necessarily caused this big rift, right? It came out in like a million little ways for me as a reader. And then by the time, I don't want to like ruin anything, but by the time her and her mother have a fight where she inadvertently injures her mother, it's like, when did things get so bad between these two people I've been reading about who were so close just like a couple of chapters ago? And I guess I was surprised by how upsetting that was to read, and how much it made me think about the pain in like a million tiny ways that my own mother probably feels all the time, just because motherhood seems like when people say it's like having your heart outside of your body, and I'm always like, I don't think I could do that. It's hard enough to have it inside. Were you trying to capture, I guess, kind of like the seemingly universal mundane ways that that splintering occurs, because there is a dramatic event with her father not being present, and the questions that she has, but that doesn't seem to be, at least for me as a reader, that didn't seem to be what caused her to have her resentments and anger towards her mother. Totally. It seemed like more mundane than that.
Yeah, I think, well, Laura just clutches Marie too tightly, I think, because she raised her alone, and, you know, because of the really, really intense circumstances of her birth. And it created this sort of like anxiety that ultimately ends up pushing her away when she's a teenager. But, you know, I'm capturing this like this moment in their relationship. Maybe down the line they'll recover from this, you know, sort of like crisis moment when they're really like their needs are so like directly opposed. I hope so. I mean, it is just really sad in general, no matter what, that like your children like grow up and hate you for a while, I think. But they do have to. It is really important for them to hate you. It's probably sadder if they never really separate from you, in a way. So
was that something that you were thinking a lot about as you were, you know, becoming a mother and having young children? Was the inevitable kind of splintering?
Yeah, I guess I had this like crazy experience of like falling in love so hard with my older son, and I had not been expecting it at all. It was so mind-blowing and nuts. And I don't think it's like that for everyone. I think at the time that it was happening to me, I assumed that it was, though. And it took like having another child and having like a slightly different, like, you know, experience, I guess, for me to realize that like, oh, like there's like a wide spectrum of like how this can go, because I totally love my younger son, but it's like this very sort of like calm, staid, complacent love where you're like, oh, I just love you. But the way that I love my older son is like, you know, oh, I love you and you infuriate me and I love you and you're driving me nuts. It's like this, like I have this like tempestuous relationship with him. So I think having experienced that helped me with like the second draft of the book, because I was like not imbuing that Laura and Marie relationship with all of these like big weighty universals about like what motherhood is. Like clearly it's something different for everyone. I did have this experience though, which totally took me by surprise, where like the whole time I was pregnant, the first time I was pregnant, I was like, I hope I love the baby. Like, you know, because like some people talk about like, oh, I can feel the baby moving and I just already know that I love her so much. And like, I did not feel that way at all. I was like, I guess it's a baby. Like, I hope I get there, you know, cool that we're doing this baby thing. And then the instant he was born, it just turned on a dime and my like whole system was flooded with like my pupils were dilated for days. It was like my brain was making MDMA. Like seriously, it was nuts. It was that intensity of just like, I need to be around this person. I cried when I wasn't with him. Like I cried when he was like at the foot of the bed and there were like 4 feet of space between us. It was nuts. And it didn't last forever. Like it couldn't, because I would have died, you know, but having had that experience, I was like, oh, that's like one of the ways that this could go.
Right. There's a scene sort of like that in the book where when Laura leaves Marie for the first time to go play a show in Philly, and she's devastated upon leaving her, and then she's happy that she's gone, and she's like embodying her former self for a little while and seeing this other way that her life could have gone had she not had Marie. And then of course when she comes back and Marie is devastated and like angry or wondering why she was left, it's like a whole new wave of guilt and terror. And I was wondering, the parts of the book that are about how difficult it is for Laura to be creative, and how little time and space she has for that while she's caring for her baby. I was wondering if you could, I guess it's something, because I am not a mother. I read about it a lot. I read about it a lot at like The Cut. We publish all sorts of things by women who are managing to get a lot done, a lot more than I get done, despite being very busy having children. Or we publish a lot of things about women who are struggling to, complete their creative work while dealing with that. But it's not something that I really can understand, because I'm extremely selfish and have no children, and my life is all about me. But when I was reading this, I guess like just the terror and like the different ways that she's being pulled at all times, and like the not being able to do the one thing that you always wanted to do without feeling this tremendous guilt, that felt like I felt that viscerally in a way that I normally don't. And I was wondering if you could expand on, I guess, how much of your own experience, how much of writing this book was something like that for you and informed, those chapters or those pages.
I mean, Laura has it a lot worse than I did. But I mean, everything that you mentioned is really, it's so real, and it is so hard for everyone who embarks on this adventure of having children. Yeah, I wish I had anything to offer that was like new or original or like helpful on this topic, but I think I was interested in exploring it in fiction just because it's I just wanted to portray it, I guess, and then like to have people sort of be able to like experience it or re-experience it, or like experience a different version of it, and just sort of like think about what that means for people. I mean, the way that in general culturally we don't allow women to who are mothers to like be something other than mothers is really striking. And there is this sort of way that being sort of like bourgeois and normal like overtakes you when you become a parent, that is, and everyone thinks that they'll be able to avoid it. And you, I guess, can by being a really terrible parent. But otherwise, like it's not like you have to just sort of like participate in this part of life. But the good news, I guess, I hope the good news that I keep telling myself is that it's not forever. It is this really intense chunk of time, and it's a time when you would want to do a lot of other things. And you can't, and it sucks, but then like there's the entire rest of your life, and and like at the end of the book, Marie is not even 40, I'm not Marie, Laura, sorry. Laura is not even 40. Like when my kids go to college, like I'll be 50, there will be a lot of time left, hopefully, for me to, I don't know, do great, big, useful things. But I also think like I couldn't have written this book without having had these experiences. So it was hard to get it done, but like it wouldn't have had anything to write about really, if I had not also done the other stuff. So yeah.
Is it helpful writing through not just the early parts of Marie's life, but writing through when she's a teenager and she's having this conflict with her own identity and with her mother? Was that, I guess, was there any catharsis in that, or did that help you process your own relationships in any particular way that you're conscious of?
I guess not. I don't know. I don't really subscribe to the idea that writing is therapeutic. Like, I think that if you like are keeping a secret private journal that no one ever sees, and the purpose of that is therapeutic, then like, yes, that kind of writing can be therapeutic. But like writing that you are like honing and crafting for publication, you know, that's your job, and like it can feel really good to like do your job, and like you get some satisfaction out of, you know, feeling like you have excelled at your job. But that's probably as far as it goes for me, like psychologically, in terms of, I don't know, like I always feel like I write about something in fiction or in, you know, like in like an essay, and I feel like I should be done with it. Like it's because I shaped it into a narrative. And so now like that part of my life is over, and I can just sort of like put it on a shelf and be done with it. And I'm always really sad and disappointed to learn that like that's just not how it works. It's still the stuff that has happened to me still exists. I can make it into a story, and I can be the person who tells the story, fine, good, better than the alternative for sure. But it's not over, and it's not, I still am always going to, you know, have like, be like churning through like the same like themes. I'm not going to suddenly, you know, I think me trying to write like a sci-fi novel that had time travel was like me really trying to become a different kind of writer than the kind of writer that I am. And I just come back to being, you know, like myself with all of my inherent limitations and the things about myself that I find really like boring and frustrating. But also the things that, you know, I'm getting better at every time I tackle them, hopefully.
Curious. So this is obviously not your first foray into fiction, but I'm curious, like after I finished writing about a person, like profiling them, I still think about them, maybe not all the time, but I still think about them.
Like from them sometimes.
Yeah, or I'm just like tormented by like some aspect of something that I inevitably screwed up or feel like I could have done better. But I'm always like haunted by people that I write about. And I wonder with fiction, like, do you still think about Laura? Do you still think about her? Do you think about these people that you've, you know, created and shaped into full human beings on the page? Do you think about them in a similar way? Are they still like with you as characters?
Not really, except that sometimes when I'm like in a place where they've been, I think about them.
An internet cafe, perhaps?
Well, that doesn't, I mean, it really should have been preserved by the Landmarks Coalition, but sadly it is no longer. And actually neither are a lot of the places that I describe in this book, even the ones that are like sort of like more recent past. There's this really great poster that I think Avid Reader is still giving away for people who send in their like receipts that prove that they bought the book. My friend Erin Williams is a really, really good graphic novelist, and she drew the internet cafe, she drew brownies, she drew like the deli that they go to, like, and they're just like, anyway, it's so perfect. It's so great. I think about them when I'm in the spots where they've been. It's sort of like I have like my real memories and my like fake memories of like the people in my books, kind of.
What has the response been like, especially from mothers or from fathers for whom, you know, parts of this experience are foreign? What has that reaction been like?
Oh, it's been really nice. I gotta say, like I've had a career full of people sometimes really hating things that I've written. So it's really nice to have people responding in a mostly affirming, positive way. Although it is weird, and I don't trust it because I just never will feel like I'm like, what's the scam? Like, are these people bots? Like, who paid them? But yeah, the thing that surprises me is when people tell me that the book made them really sad and it made them cry. Because I know that there are very sad things in the book, but to me, so much of the book is sort of like hopeful. And I feel like it ends on a really hopeful note. And I also feel like the early part, I mean, even though, you know, there's like intensity in it and also like death, to me, it's like a time that in a place that I feel really nostalgic for. And it was really fun for me to write. So when people are like, oh, it made me feel so like sad and like wistful, I'm like, oh, you don't enjoy feeling wistful? Weird.
It made me sad. But also, you know, it made me think, I kept thinking as I was reading it about, so my mom always tells this story that there are like a lot of holes in, about how when she was like 14 or 15, she grew up in Queens, that she like went to Studio 54 with the Village People, and she was like in a limousine with the Village People. And then the story just like abruptly stops, and it's not clear like where my mom went after being at Studio 54 with the Village People and in their limo. And I kept like chuckling to myself and thinking about that as I was reading this, because it's like, oh, like basically everything that Marie will never know in intense detail, it's presented in this very satisfying way that I would imagine, like, you know, my mother has a, you know, had a similarly rich life prior to being my mother that I will never know about, and your children will probably never know in extraordinary detail about your life, even though so much of it is Googleable. And so I guess I was wondering, you know, did your own relationship with your mother inform that, and your own curiosity about her life, or was it not about you and your relationships at all?
I did think about like the person who my specific mother was before she became my mother, but I was also just thinking about like an experience that neither my mother nor I had, which was to become a mother at such an early age, when like you really are still so, I mean, a lot of people do it, and like for the entire history of time have had kids when they were like in their early 20s. But like it would have, if I had done that, like when I was in my early 20s, like I really was barely capable of taking care of a cat. So like putting that perspective on it was, that created like a different sort of set of challenges to be able to like imagine that fully. That is interesting about your mom.
What happened later that night, she won't tell me. All right, so I'm going to open this up to questions, assuming I can figure out how to do that. Let me see. Can I do that? Is that working? This is not going well. I can't figure out how to do this. It says chat disabled. Is the chat disabled? Oh wait, there they are. Got it. Oh, a comment, not a question. Not what this is for. Let me see. Can you talk about the difference between writing fiction and nonfiction from Katie?
Hi, Katie. Thank you for coming. I really wish that we could be together in person. I was really looking forward to it. In the past, I have found that writing nonfiction is a lot faster and more satisfying than writing fiction. But then after I started to get better at research and to do more reported pieces, I found that doing fiction, like the barrier to entry fiction-wise was like a little bit lower. And then I started liking fiction more because it was just like easier to, like, the part of writing like articles and reported essays that I hate is when you're still doing research, but you're not sure whether you have done too much research, and whether you're just like now using research as an excuse to not start writing, or whether on the other hand, you might have not done enough research and maybe you should do more research, and maybe it really isn't time to start writing yet. And I hope that gets easier, because I feel like I have no idea how to, it never seems like the right time to start writing, basically. So that's bad. But I don't know. I think I've just gotten like slower and a little too, like I'm just like overthinking everything too much as I get older. And I really wish that I could get some of the energy of my like bloggy 20-something self back. But I don't know. I would have to like purposely like take out part of my like, you know, brain in order to get there, I think. So, yeah.
It's funny because sometimes if I'm ever forced to like revisit my earliest stuff, I'm shocked by how, first of all, just like how mean I was, but also just how simple things seem to be then. And like, whereas now I'm just completely crippled by my empathy for like anyone, that I find it much harder to even to make the kind of just like mundane judgments you have to make when you write about real people. Yeah. And the idea of writing about people that like I don't have to call to fact check something with does seem really, really nice. Is it kind of like a relief to write about people who are your own creation in that sense?
At first it is, and then like as time goes on, you do start to feel like the same sort of obligation towards them to like treat them fairly and with dignity, even if you don't like them, that you do towards real people. You know, but I remember one of the things that I felt like was most helpful that my editor of my first novel, Friendship, did to the draft of it that she read was she basically just went through and took out all of the meanness, all of the descriptions that I thought were sort of clever, but that just had this sort of, you know, judgmental cattiness that didn't do anything for the story. And you know, it just turned out that the story did not need them. You know, that it actually read a lot more. You could just read it a lot faster without getting stuck on a lot of like editorializing that didn't need to be in there. You know, because I think I thought that I was, you know, Edith Wharton or something, but it does turn out that like unless you are someone who is so gloriously bitchy that they have elevated it to an art form like Edith Wharton or like Alan Hollinghurst, you really should just like probably reel it in a little bit and maybe, you know, maybe like keep like one in every 10 snide little asides.
That's interesting that that's like a lesson that came from someone editing fiction. Because I feel like if someone were to suggest that about, you know, a profile of a real person, it could seem like, you know, you're being too easy on them or you're pulling your punches for some other reason. But I feel like it's almost seems like an easier lesson to accept if it's in a novel.
I mean, it's probably pretty much the exact same discipline, right, though. I have never written a profile of anyone who I didn't admire. And that's like a choice that I made because I don't trust my ability to make those little distinctions. But like when I have, I guess, like written in the past few years, like as like my, like, you know, mature version of myself, about, you know, people or situations or even books, like writing book reviews where I'm like trying to be fair to something, but also like make it clear that like I don't approve. You know, sometimes it's just better to just describe something in a really straightforward way. Right. And then, you know, if you describe something in a very straightforward way or someone in a very straightforward way and they sound like an asshole, like that's on them.
Okay, ACW wants to know, were there characters that you developed much more than you were able to include in the book? And were there storylines that you had to edit or that were difficult to remove? Oh,
not really. I think there were some sort of like deleted scenes involving the guys in the book. So like Laura's main early 20s love interest, the guy who turns out to be Marie's father, and also the guy who Laura ends up marrying later in the book. Like, I had to flesh them out just a little, like to make it clear that they were, you know, people and not just like cardboard types. But I didn't want to give them a lot more than that.
That was kind
And
of satisfying,
yeah,
because it wasn't like they were, totally unimportant, or that they didn't have any dignity as characters and were just, one-dimensional. But the lack of exploration of like the guy who turns out to be Marie's father, of like his psyche, or that, I know there was something satisfying about that as a reader. Like, okay, all right, back to back to Laura and back to Marie.
yeah, I think also some people just really aren't that complicated. I mean, that guy really wishes he was more complicated, you know?
Yeah. Okay, Jane wants to know, what was the process of writing multiple drafts like, and how do you decide what changes to make?
Well, I was actually really lucky in a way that it took me so long to write this book, because every time I picked it up again, I had pretty much forgotten what was in it and what happened, like kind of coming to it as though I was editing a book that someone else wrote, which I have done. So that was nice. So I could just sort of like turn on my editorial brain and just treat it as though I was working on someone else's book in a way. Yeah, and I think I also really benefited from like gaining the experience of just having more time in my life pass, and also like having an entire like other child, so that the experience of motherhood in the book could be more than just like my impression of motherhood from just what my experience was like with my first child, I guess. That helped a lot. I wish though that I didn't have to do so many drafts. I feel like maybe I always hope that it will be faster next time. That my next book will take me 3 years or maybe 2 years. Like that would be really good for me financially. But it's disappointing to know this about myself, but I think it just sort of does take as long as it takes. And I also should consider myself lucky to not be one of the writers for whom it routinely takes a decade, because that exists. Like everybody has their own sort of like metabolism for these things. And if mine turns out to be like, 5 or 6 years,
Yeah,
that's okay. It's not great, but it's fine. It's doable. Sort
this
of.
is maybe a stupid question. This is from me, not from anyone else. But you said that part of the attraction with Laura as a character is that she is extraordinarily unlike you. But is there any character, I guess, that you relate to more than others in the book, or has that changed over time, or did it change over different drafts?
I started with Marie. I started with that scene where Marie throws her phone at her mom.
That was the first scene?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it happens relatively late in the book. And I think, yeah, there's like much more of me in Marie, the sort of like moody teen, than there is in Laura, the ambitionless but talented songwriter.
Do you play any instruments? Do you have any musical?
No, I'm pretty bad at music. I like to do karaoke, but that's like more about performing, I think, and like needing some sort of outlet to do that, than it is about like actually singing. I mean, I learned how to play the piano. I was never very good at it. I have some really good musicians in my family. My dad is a songwriter, like as a hobby, but he's very good at it. And my brother, who is an ER nurse, is also just a really, really talented musician who's like always been in bands. So yeah, it's like very normal for me to like think about music and like have a lot of music around. And I play music I always like, and there's always music playing in my house. Like, even if it's like, it's not always up to me what the music is at this juncture, which is very bad, but we seem to have weaned my older son off of his year-long obsession with only hearing the song that the crab sings in Moana. So those dark days at last are past, and we should all be really, really grateful. It got to the point where we were so tired of hearing like the Jerome Clement, even though brilliant performance, so good, version of that song, that we started listening to it in every language that it's available in. So now we listen to it in Japanese. It's in, not just Spanish, but like a lot of different kinds of Spanish, Catalan, and yeah, anyway. I like music. I'm sorry, I forgot the question.
I forgot also. Yeah, but something I was thinking about, one of the, I think I felt the worst reading this book at this like very little moment, where Laura encounters an old acquaintance of hers who is like sort of a music journalist, and they have this like what turns out to be very transactional, for the journalist, very transactional encounter that made me like physically sick as a journalist. And I guess I'm wondering, was that in any way like am I grasping too much to think that was like in any way a commentary on journalism and like the type of media that you were involved in previously?
Well,
don't let me down here. I want it to be a commentary so bad.
No, that character is more sort of like a plot device. But I don't know, like she did seem very real to me though. Like, and also like I'm a lot like more like her than I am like Laura. Like she's just someone who wants to get like promoted at her job and like get the scoop, and like that's very relatable. I don't know.
Why do you like her is what made me sick, to be clear.
Yeah, no, it all works out. So no harm, no foul.
Okay. Kylie says, can you please share with us your writing routine?
Oh, to have a writing routine. That would be so cool. I #goals. No, the one thing that is consistent in my writing life is that I mostly day to day I'm working on more paychecky things, whether it's teaching or writing like profiles or essays. And then when I really need to get work done on like fiction or essays that are like my idea, that I'm not immediately going to get paid for, I tend to have to take some time away from my family and like just go away up. Like I don't do it for like long chunks of time because I can't, or like logistical and financial reasons. Although I hope to someday. But I'll just go away for like a long weekend, and I'll have like one day of like just like sleeping and reading and like eating a lot of food and like watching like whatever TV show I want to watch and like kind of getting nothing done. And then I'll have like, and then like the next day I'll like wake up early and like write all day, and then I'll have like hopefully one more day of that, and then I'll come home, and it's so great. And I wish I could do it right now. It sounds so wonderful, right? And I've done it a lot, like while I was pregnant both times, because both times I was pregnant, I was like, well, this is the last time I'll ever be able to accomplish anything. So like, I got to get on it. And so I would like have these like, long, very like self-involved days of like, just like writing and not thinking about like anyone else's existence. And then I would be like, oh my God, I have like a baby in me. I'm fucking ravenous. And then I would like eat like some like enormous like meal that like someone else cooked, and it would be amazing and great. Like I would eat like a, burger and like a pint of ice cream and watch a bunch of TV and go to bed. Doesn't that sound so good?
That That sounds like a great routine.
Yeah. If only that was my routine, like daily, I would write 1 million books. It would be so wonderful.
Okay. Sorry, I'm blind. Jocelyn wants to know, does listening to different types of music help you with the writing process?
Hi, Jocelyn. I'm so sad that this event is not at Politics and Prose because you live so close to there. And it would have been so convenient for you. But
this is probably more convenient, actually, for anyone.
Yeah, but like, I feel like we're all probably pretty much over convenience at this point. Like, it's so great to not have to leave my house or be able to. Oh, sorry, I'm refreshing my memory about what the actual. Oh yeah, so okay, I actually did have there's a Spotify playlist of songs from 2003 that I listened to a lot when I was working on this book, and it's so evocative and so great, and it's such a like masterfully put together playlist, and I can actually like, if I have my act together, I can like. You can just like text it to me because I know you, but like I have shared it on Twitter before too, so you can like look it up. But my friend Matthew Perpetua, who is like a longtime music journalist, does these great playlists, and the 2003 one is like especially on point. If you were like in your late teens, early 20s in 2003, though, it might be too overwhelming to listen to. I actually was talking to my friend about this playlist, and he said that just scrolling through the track listing gave him a panic attack. So your mileage may vary. But yeah,
it's also consuming a lot of other like early 2000s content, like movies, TV shows, while you're writing this.
I did. So the book, Meet Me in the Bathroom by Lizzie Goodman, which is like an oral history of the downtown New York music scene during that time, came out while I was like, I think I had already finished the draft of the book that sold, but I got to like do the revisions while reading it. And so that was like really, really helpful. I felt like the book had been published like just in time to keep me from getting anything too egregiously wrong. So I'm very, very grateful. But other than that, no, I just like, I mean, I did, I like Googled stuff to make sure that I wasn't like years off. But I was, I don't know, I've gotten a lot of questions about like how I researched this book. And I was like, I lived there, was alive. Like, and I sort of remember like what it was like to not have a phone.
That sounds nice. Okay.
But sometimes you wait for a long time for somebody to show up at a place where they said they would be.
Yeah, that sounded kind of nice too, though. Like, Gail says, is there a uniquely heightened quality that characters? Wait, sorry, I can't read. Is there a uniquely heightened quality that characterizes the mother-daughter dynamic that you wanted to explore that is different from your mother-son dynamic? Sorry, I can't read.
Oh, that's Gail. Hi. Thank you for coming. That's such a great question. I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, you tell me, actually, because like you have both, right? So yeah, I'm a little bummed that I don't have any daughters, and so I will never get to like live the reality of like having a teenage daughter.
You'll never get a phone thrown at your face.
I don't know. I mean, I get things thrown at me a lot. So I'm not, also like, who knows what sort of like gender identity my children will end up with. Like life is long and complicated. But I think I went through this period of like mourning the possibility of like being like the mother of a daughter, probably while I was working on this book, but now I'm kind of over it. I also like living in quarantine with my sons, like the prospect of having a third child has never seemed less appealing. Oh, everyone's cheering. Are people cheering there? It's 7:00.
In Wash, we don't do that here. My boyfriend heard you and is now clapping. But other than that, no, we don't do that here.
Oh, yeah, it's really nice. It's like cathartic and kind of beautiful.
I didn't even know that was a thing until I saw it on Twitter like yesterday. That was completely not on my radar, the cheering.
Oh yeah, no, it's huge. My kids also look forward to it all day. Like, you know, well, there's not a lot to, they're also really looking forward to like the Wildcat special that comes out on Monday. And honestly, so am I.
Well, on that note, I think that's it for questions. And thank you so much for doing this. I really did enjoy the book. And if anyone watching, just knocked over a lighter, if anyone watching this has not bought it, I really recommend it. And you can get it at that link at the bottom of the screen there.
Olivia, thank you so much for doing this. I owe you one.
But thank you.
Yeah.
And congratulations.
Thanks.